Everybody, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board Podcast, where we bring in experts in the franchise community to share tips and tricks and actionable advice that will help you to build a more successful franchise system. And I've got a special guest with me today, no pun intended, Daniel Stein. He's the founder CEO of Special Strong. If you haven't heard of them yet, you should get on LinkedIn because you've probably liked several of his posts because they're super inspirational. Good client of mine, but also just a friend, somebody I just really appreciate how he approaches franchising. Guys, Daniel, he started his entrepreneurial journey early, before he was an adult, started an eBay business, he started several other types of businesses that he's run, but this one is a very meaningful impact brand. Impact brand, if you're not familiar with that term, meaning like it's a purpose-first organization that also happens to turn a profit, right? So Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and about Special Strong before we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, Dave. I've been following you, and obviously, you know that I use your software. I love your software. Thank you. But it's an honor to be on the podcast. And yeah, so my story. So I was diagnosed at the age of 4 with a learning disability, and my parents did not know how to help me. I saw doctors, I saw counselors. And the one thing they did that helped the most was they got me involved in sports. And so when I started playing sports, there was a clear correlation of the improvement in my behavior, the improvement in me learning in school. And so quickly, my parents figured out Daniel needs a physical outlet to help manage his challenges. And I also figured that out. I also learned that when I exercised and when I did sports, I felt way better, and it just made me come alive. So I gravitated towards working out. So at a very early age, I started working out in the gym. I rode my bike up to the YMCA every single day. None of my schoolmates were doing that. I was one of the only ones. And I rode my bike miles to the gym, by the way. I didn't know what I was doing in the gym. I just know I loved it, and it made me feel better. So I kept doing that all throughout middle school, all throughout high school. And in high school, I got in a lot of trouble. I mentioned that I had that learning disability. One of the things that comes with a learning disability, ADHD, very impulsive, addictive behaviors. So I had all of that in high school. As a matter of fact, I'll just be transparent. My senior year of high school, I overdosed on drugs, and it was very bad. My parents ended up checking me out of high school, and I ended up going to an inpatient rehab program to get help and to get sober. And it turns out that the rehab program did more harm than good, because I was with a bunch of other drug addicts that didn't want help. They were just ready to get out and go do drugs again. It was horrible. So my parents found this out, and they said, Daniel, we're getting you out of this rehab program. We're going to do an outpatient program. So I started doing an outpatient program. I got sober. I was doing well. At this time, I would have been around 17 or 18. And I was able to get sober of most drugs. And as you know, I love working out. Okay. So guess what I started doing? I started doing steroids. So I got sober of drugs, but I went to the next thing, which was steroids. And I was a big boy. I grew up very small. And so I was very insecure. So working out and taking steroids really helped me create this false identity. And I did that for years. And then one day I was in the gym. I was actually at 24-hour fitness in Frisco, Texas. It was just another day in the gym. And out of nowhere, somebody interrupted my workout, shook my hand, and invited me to church. And I grew up in church, and I had stopped attending church. Church was not for me. It was boring. I didn't like reading hymns. And that's how I grew up. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. But at the time that my friend invited me to church, I was desperate. I knew that I needed change. I knew that I needed help. So I said, you know what? I'll go to church. So I went to church with them, and I encountered a loving God, Jesus Christ, that radically changed my life. And so I gave my life over to Jesus. I surrendered my life. And that is really where the journey of everything began. I started getting mentored immediately at the church. And my mentor, this is how the business started, but I started getting mentored by Rob Moore. He had a disability called MS. And one day he sat down with me, and he said that he had a prophetic vision. And if you don't know what a prophetic vision is, it's just a vision from God. And God still speaks today. God still gives visions. It's all over the Bible. It happens. And he gave a vision to Rob. And the vision that he gave Rob was me training kids and adults that had disabilities. And so Rob presented this to me, and I was just in shock. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. At this particular time, I was a full-time banker at Chase Bank. And my mentor with MS is saying, you're supposed to be a trainer working with kids that have disabilities. So I ended up making a career change, leaving banking, going into the fitness industry. And then shortly after that, I married my best friend, Trinity. So that was in 2013. And then in 2016, my wife and I together started Special Strong, all based on the prophetic vision of Rob Moore in 2011. So that's a little history, just where I've come from, my journey. I would never have thought of starting this business. You know, Dave, we don't have any competitors, okay? There's nobody else in the industry. You look in the fitness industry, nobody is servicing special needs, nobody. So I wouldn't have thought of it, but God obviously has a heart for this population, and he gave this vision to Rob, and he picked me to steward the vision and to grow the vision. And as you said earlier, impact brand and impact, you know, our vision is to impact over 1 million athletes that have disabilities, and that's our heart.
Wow. Yeah, what a journey. I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing that with us, because I didn't know that part of the story at all. Like, I had no idea how this idea came about. I just thought you were kind of doing it, and then you got a guide and somebody helped you franchise. But I mean, right now, if you don't mind sharing, like, tell us a little bit about the franchise right now. Like, how you've been doing it since 2016. That's when you started the business. When did you start franchising this?
Yeah, so great question. So here's the story there. We started the company in 2016, McKinney, Texas. We grew it for 4 years, one location. And then in 2020, we had a video go viral. And when I say viral, it's probably had over 100 million views.
Whoa.
You can find it on our webpage, YouTube, but it was of a young man named Brandon. And we helped him walk for the first time in 8 years. And we actually caught it on video where he got out of his wheelchair and he began walking for the first time in over 8 years. And so it went viral, right? Because this is the first time this kid's walking, and it was our services that helped him. So what happened was we had that video go viral, and we had hundreds, thousands of people all over the world that were asking for our service. And we were, you know, it was sad. I literally would copy and paste the message. Hi, thank you for reaching out. We would love to help you. Sorry, we're only in McKinney, Texas. There's nothing that we can do to help you. And I would copy and paste that to every single person because there was nothing that we could do to service them. And it finally just got so frustrating. I thought, what can we do to grow? So for us, we saw two options. Number one, we can hire a manager, hire a GM, and start a second location. So that would mean we need to pay a nice salary, $60,000, $80,000 a year. Well, guess what? We don't have that kind of cash. Okay. So that wasn't an option. Then we heard about franchising, which I didn't know anything about. I knew about Subway and McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, but I didn't know how it all worked.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I liked about franchising was, yes, there is an initial very large upfront investment needed, but in the long term, it's a lot less expensive than hiring 20 general managers and paying them all $60,000. I can just have 20 franchisees and in essence do the exact same thing. There's a little bit less control involved, but there's enough. The franchising allows you to have enough control to maintain your brand integrity and scale faster and without as much cash. So that was the direction we went.
Wow. Yeah, and honestly, being an impact brand doesn't always mean that you're the most profitable, right? So it's gyms do well, and yet the mission's more important than the maybe the P&L in an impact brand. So I think you found your match really, because franchising is the perfect vehicle to be a capital light expansion process, but also if you can find people that are as passionate as you are about this in a local market, they're going to do a better job than you in that local market. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, I love it. So how many units do you guys have operating today, Daniel? Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we have 10 franchisees, 10 locations. Over the last 3 years, we've just been growing organically. Our number one focus from the very beginning, and this really ties into my faith, but when I started franchising, I really prayed a lot about, well, let me just back up. Anytime I've started a business, I always ask the Lord for a specific word for the business. And so I've done this for my marriage. So I have a very specific word for my marriage. And any business I've started, I always ask the Lord, I'd like a word, like this is my focus word, my focus Bible verse for the whole business. And so he actually gave me one for the franchise. And it's a beautiful verse. It's in Proverbs, and I'll summarize it.
Please.
And the summary is, take care of your flock, know the status of your flock, and everything will be added to you. In other words, if you take care of the franchisees, because they are our flock, if I steward them well, if I have, we in the business world, we call them KPIs. If I know their KPIs and I know how they're performing and I'm taking care of them well, the Bible promises that I will have enough left over, enough abundance for my family, and then for us to also invest in other people. We're big on generosity. So we don't just want abundance. We actually want prosperity. So we have enough for ourselves and then enough to give to other people. And to me, that verse is the promise. So that's been my focus from the very beginning, is how do we take care of the flock? How do we take care of the flock? And I think our flock is happy. I mean, there's certainly times when we've upset them and we've done things wrong. But I think our flock is very happy. If you were to interview any of them, I think for the most part, they're very happy.
Yeah, well, good validation calls equals good growth. But I want to pause for a second, because this is awesome, getting to know you and hearing about the experience. We're going to dive a lot deeper into this, but the purpose of the franchise today, guys, is faith in franchising. Like, whether or not we've had a conversation personally or not, like my faith is incredibly important to me, and it's helped me to grow clientele. It's helped me to grow other, an Amazon business. We can talk about that another time, where we rapidly grew that. And it was completely inspired that started that business. I started with like $180, where we had medical bills out our ears.
Wow.
With our son. He had cancer when he was 3. We just moved across the country. We're totally broke. 4 months later, this kid gets diagnosed with cancer. We're like, uh-oh. So, but it was a path where like that e-commerce business generated the revenue that we needed to pay off the medical bills.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's really important to me, and I feel like that everybody has a journey, and whether you're Christian or you're Muslim or you're Hindi, or it doesn't matter to me. Like what faith you have. Faith has a really critical part, I think, in developing successful enterprises. So there are a couple of people I know. Daniel's one of them, and I wanted to just have him share this experience and his story with you, because I feel like it's pretty dang inspiring, and hopefully it opens up a little dialogue. So there are more people out there that have these incredible experiences that I feel like sometimes we hold them close to the vest, because we're trying to maybe be overly sensitive. That's become kind of inculcated into us through social media and the cancel culture. And yet I think that more people need to share these sorts of things. So Daniel, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with you, and things that are important where sometimes it might not be comfortable, but Daniel certainly is comfortable sharing. So I thought of you as one of the first people to talk to about this. So as we explore this a little bit, Daniel, I'd love to know a little bit about, so you found Christ, going through some pretty tough times in your life, right? You've been through rehab, and this has become a core. I love that you're sharing, like you're looking for a focus, like a verse. You mentioned core values to me before, and I was wondering if you don't mind, can we just start there? Like, you built this brand, like it was inspiration from God that like gave Rob Moore the idea to tell you about this. I didn't even know that part of your story, which is super cool. And then you had the faith to actually take a step into the process. Can you tell us, like, just that transition point between you being a banker, having a career that was probably paying okay and secure, to making that step? How did you make that transition? Because that must have required a lot of faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to define my faith, so for me, my faith is, I am a believer in Jesus Christ, that he died on the cross for my sins, and he is the only way to heaven. And so that is my personal belief. And so that is how I live my life. I do my absolute best to live my life according to the Bible, which I believe is 100% perfect and 100% truth. So if there is any standard that we talk about today, my perspective is the standard is coming from Scripture, just to give a background there. So for me, when I got saved, Rob gave me the vision, and then I ended up leaving my banking career. And so just to give you a little bit more to the story, when I went into the fitness industry, the first thing I did was I actually had the opportunity to manage a women's weight loss center. Okay. That was my transition from banking into the fitness world. And I picked it because it was a very comparable salary that I needed into the banking world. I didn't want to go right into training, which is really tricky with the salary stuff. So I liked the guarantee of the salary. And so I was there for about 6 months. And then the location that I was at shut down and I was left without a job.
Mm.
So and I really felt God led me into working at this company. And I'm so glad that my faith led me to that, because if my faith hadn't led me to that, I probably would have thought I made a mistake.
Mhm.
But I never thought I made a mistake, because God does not make mistakes. If God leads you somewhere, most of the time, it doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to turn out, right?
Mhm.
It never does. So I knew that even though the company shut down and all that, I knew that God was in that. So I ended up starting my own personal training business just on the side. I worked with the general population. I did really well. And then I finally ended up working for a big box gym, Lifetime Fitness. This was in 2014. I became a top performer for the company over a year period, and I was doing very well. I was making more money than I ever had in my career. And then one day I was praying in the morning. I like to pray in the mornings and spend time with the Lord in the mornings. And I felt like the Lord said to me, he wanted more time with me in the mornings. And the only way that I could do that was I was going to have to surrender a very affluent client that I was training in the mornings at Lifetime Fitness. So part of being a believer is surrendering and obeying. And so I said, Lord, I obey. So I went to this client and I told this client, hey, listen, these morning appointments aren't going to work. I can't train you anymore. And so I gave her to another trainer who was very happy. And then all of a sudden my mornings are free. And so now I have more time with God in the morning. And so I'm expecting like God is going to definitely bless me, right, for what I just did. And instead of being blessed in the way that I thought, which was maybe making more money and helping more people at the gym, my business at the gym took the biggest negative turn since I had been there. In other words, I went from being a top performer of the company to one of the very, very, very bottom performers of the company. I mean, I had clients left and right quitting, ending their relationship with me, all out of my control. And again, I knew that the Lord was leading me. The Lord told me to give up that client and the way that I did. And I knew that that was leading me into a transition season. So as my business was dwindling down, I thought, you know what, I'm back at square one. I can either rebuild the business, or maybe the Lord is telling me it's time to transition. And he was making it easy for me, because it's hard to step away from a comfortable salary. But all of a sudden, when it's taken away from you, it's like, well, now you've got a little bit more of a choice. And so I made the choice to leave the gym and start Special Strong. And I felt like that decision to surrender that client was actually the confirmation that gave me the faith to leave the gym and start the business. And that's how the business started. We started with a Facebook post, and we got our very first client on an organic Facebook post. And then it just grew and grew and grew organically through word of mouth. And here we are.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, what a journey. It's funny how usually society looks at failures or downturns or difficult things as real negatives. And it's interesting how that perspective of knowing that God is in control, or if we choose to let him be in control, like he's a much better pilot than we are, like
Yeah.
he can lead us down roads. But personally, I've been through that same experience in my career where something that seemed like this is a great role, things are going great, all of a sudden took a real surprising left turn, which
Yeah.
I totally out of my control. Even one of them, the thing that led me even into this industry was I did the right thing, to treat a client the right way, and it really made the CEO feel like he couldn't trust me, and I was completely perplexed. I'm like, no, this was the right decision, 100% the right decision, and I found out later I had another executive who was telling another story on the back end that created some angst, but I never would have left. I never
Yeah.
would have left. And that led me to the role right before this, where again, felt inspired to make that decision. And then, and long story short, executive running the company had a little bit of a personal challenge, and it created some real problems in the company. And the day that I decided, I was like, I just felt like I've got to do something different. I don't care if I own part of the company. I don't care that we've doubled in the last 2 years since I've been here. Like, I need to do something different. And like 3 minutes later, I'm getting in my car, my phone rings, and it's client tethers, the
Oh,
founder of
wow.
client tether saying, "Hey, are you ready?" I turned him down like 4 times, but he's like, "Are you ready to come and help me run this company?" And I was like, "Okay, like I get the message. I get the message. Let me have this conversation." And it turned out to be a real, and even like the second day on the job, I was like, "This company's smaller than I expected. Like maybe I've made a mistake here." Because I was used to working in bigger companies, and but again, I knew that that was a faith-led decision, so I stuck with it. And obviously, it's been a pretty good run since then. But it's funny, even you'll have misgivings, even when you're doing what you feel is inspired of the Lord, and it's important to stick with them, because otherwise, what would you be doing now? Working another Lifetime Fitness and
Right.
feeling like, where the heck is my life going? And you're
Yep.
making personal impacts, maybe with individuals, but your ability to impact this very underserved population is completely magnified now. I love it. So tell me more, Daniel, if you don't mind, about so you guys have infused into the franchise culture some very strong core values that are based upon your faith, based upon Bible verses, which I frankly love. Tell me a little bit about like these core values and how they've shaped the culture of your franchise around your faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to mention too that all of our core values are rooted in scripture, but we were actually not a Christian company. And I tell every franchisee that's considering the brand, and any prospect, any current franchisee, we're not a Christian company. And what I mean by that is we don't only bring in Christians to
Mhm.
the company. Okay. So that was a decision I made a long time ago. And we will basically bring in anyone that we feel that has a calling to work with this population, and will embrace our core values. And so you look at our core values: stewardship, transparency, ownership, and a big one is no judgment. Okay.
Mhm.
And then there's the generosity. Those are our main core values, represented by the acronym STRONG. And here's the thing that upsets me a lot. And Jesus Christ changed my life. Okay. So I do not keep Jesus Christ in a box.
Mhm.
I do not separate my faith and my business. I don't know that I would not be capable of doing that. It would be like I was talking to a female and pretending that I wasn't married to my wife. Okay. That, to me, that's what it would be like to just leave Jesus to the side and pretend he doesn't exist when I'm running a business. Okay. So I want to lead with that. And the core values are who we are as a company. And we actually have people. We have a Hindu on our team. We have other people on our team who have very different beliefs than us. We've never had a problem. We don't push our faith down people's throat, but we do get them to embrace our core values. And one of the ways that we do that, we talk about our core values all the time. It's not just on a wall. Okay. It is the very first time a prospect comes into the brand, they're going to hear about our core values anytime that during that process. And what we do is we hire and we reward on core values. Now, we can't fire a franchisee, but we will fire an employee if the core values are in misalignment. Okay. So that is how we operate our culture. Anytime we terminate an employee, it's because there's a core value misalignment. Anytime we give an award to a franchisee, we do it every quarter. We award our franchisees, and it's all based on what core value did they exemplify the most in this quarter. And we're obsessed about it in our culture. And it's really a beautiful thing, because you're looking at non-Christians who are operating with biblical core values. And what they're seeing is they're actually seeing the fruit in their business of operating God's way. Okay. Because the core values we created are just, we believe that this is how God wants us to run our business. And if we can get people to align with that, they will be blessed. Christian or not Christian, you will be blessed by operating God's way. Now, listen, there's much more greater blessing when you are of the faith and operating in those values. Okay. That's a whole nother level. But the non-believers, they still get to experience the best-selling book of all time, by the way, called the Bible. It's the best-selling book. There's no other book that compares. It is the best-selling book of all time. And Jesus Christ, there's no disputing that he was the greatest leader in history, and he is the most talked about leader to this day. There's just no one greater. So we take what we learned from him in the Bible through a relationship with him, and we incorporate that and infuse it all over our culture. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and what you're hitting on is that there's universality, right? When you lead by faith, right? And you infuse your faith in Jesus Christ into your business culture, then without being, I mean, the funny thing is, if you don't mind a riff on this, Christians can be some of the most kind, loving, inclusive people on the planet. And some folks also use those teachings to create exclusivity. And I'm grateful that you're the former, not the latter, right? But it's important to recognize that Christ was the most inclusive person on the planet. You know, he did not need a DEI officer to show him the way. He was the way, right? And he led the way. And so I think that some people, I think, get afraid of their faith being infused in their franchise or infused in their business, because they're afraid it'll be exclusionary. Yeah. It should be the opposite. I mean, most religions, when you look at them, like Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, like they're all actually extremely inclusive. And yet sometimes operators or practitioners choose to look at that a different way. So I'm grateful that you've made that part of it, because there shouldn't. I know other brands as well. We'll have a few other people on in other episodes that talk about this too. They've been created incredibly inclusive environments based upon their faith, and I think that's the way religion generally is. But I'm grateful that you've kind of shown the way here. And I want to know about fruits, right? So we've got core values that are attracting the right people regardless of their faith. We're operating on principles that have been outlined in Scripture that are helping people operate businesses. What are you seeing as the impact, the overall impact of what you've been inspired to build out here, when you're talking about you want to train a million special needs athletes? Tell me a little bit more about some of the programs and things that you've built around the business based upon those core values and that inspiration.
Yeah. So really, I talked about earlier the verse that the Lord personally gave me, which it was about the flock and stewarding the flock. But the verse for the entire company to the public, okay, because what I'm telling you is more private for me. The verse I gave you is not for the franchisees, but we do have a company verse, and it's John 10:10. And it says that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and that I, Jesus, came that they may have life and they may have it more abundantly. So when your question is, what kind of impact are you making? Well, our impact is abundant life for people that have mental, physical, and cognitive challenges. And, we've impacted around 5,000 to 10,000 people now, not only here in the States, but we also have a certification program where we've certified over 1,300 coaches to do what we do. That's a separate company that we also have. And so you talk about impact. These are all people they're living and breathing more abundant life, more independence for people that have mental, physical, cognitive challenges. You look at Brandon being able to walk again for the first time in 8 years. We've had several salvations, people that have special needs coming to know Jesus for the first time in their life, employees coming to know Jesus. And more than anything, we're really just being the hands and feet of Jesus to these people that have mental, physical, cognitive challenges. They can't just go in the gym and work out. They don't have those opportunities. And not only are they getting a workout, which is certainly great, but more than anything is they're getting a relationship with a trainer or a coach who's changing their life through one-on-one private training, through group classes, through aquatics. We have a lot of different revenue sources, a lot of different services that we offer. But these are all services designed for independent living and abundant life for anybody that we're serving. And we have some incredible, mind-blowing testimonials. We just had somebody, one of our franchisees in Houston, a mom reached out and said, "You've given me my daughter back. You've given me my daughter back." We've had stories where, kids will, going from depression to living life again. There used to be a young man with Down syndrome who was so depressed, he'd go to church and he'd just sit down, wouldn't participate in church, went through our services, and he got to the point where he's raising his hands in worship with Down syndrome during service, going up to the altar and praying. And the only thing that changed was he started working out with us and experiencing the life that is in our culture. So that's the kind of impact that we're all about. And again, the neat thing is that it's okay to do good and make money. That's not a sin. That's not a bad thing. And it's just about, for us, it's about the order. Okay. So we are not profit and shareholder first. I would call this shareholder capitalism. Okay. I don't know if you've heard that term, but the term is we're focused on our vendors, client tether. How can we form relationships with everybody around us and make that the focus of our business, including our clients, instead of how do we make our shareholders happy and make the bottom line better, which is what a lot of companies do. And that's corporate capitalism.
Mhm.
That is not us at all.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is we actually still get to make money. And I believe that the way that we do it is actually better for the bottom line when you put the people first.
Yeah. Well, you and I share that philosophy, and that's infused into our core values as well. What I find though is, it's a retention discussion, right? Like you, well, there are verses coming to my mind about people about people remaining, right? About you want to be able to have people come to work with you and then also not just leave because they're not getting what they need out of the relationship. And if you're focused on your needs first in that relationship, they won't remain. They'll
Yep.
take, and yet I'm sure you guys have incredible retention because people are having life-changing experiences, not just the individuals that come through the door to get help, but also the coaches, the people
Yep.
running the business. I mean, your posts, every time I see one of your posts, there are thousands of people that are liking those things. And that's not meant to elevate you. And
Right.
I know that's not why you post them, but the stories of the individuals that are being changed, it's
Mhm.
it's it's inspirational. It's a very different model. I think
Yeah.
I think of guys like Mills of Hope as well that are like this whole model. It's one of the first 501c3 franchise models, right? Where it's a total nonprofit giving meals to people that desperately need them. And
Mhm.
somehow you're also able to make money while you do
Yep.
that. I find that to be pretty inspired. So, man, if you don't mind, Daniel, I would love to have you tell us just a little bit more about like maybe at the local level in operations. So franchisors, it's easy to like write playbooks and operations manuals and FDDs and then core values. Do you guys operate on EOS or how do you get you? It seems like maybe you do from some of the words you've shared, but maybe talk about the structure and how have you infuse that even into like the way you operate on a daily basis?
Yeah, we're big on EOS. Corporately, we got trained on it about 2 years ago. And
Mhm.
so then we started incorporating that into all of our trainings. So anytime a new franchisee goes through our 2-week training program, they learn about a lot of the principles of EOS. And really that is the heartbeat of setting quarterly priorities,
Mhm.
action items, and really working backwards from the 10-3-1 year.
Mhm.
And we have an amazing we have a business coach right now. His name is Jerry Henley. He's been in the industry for 20 years. And really that's really what it's all about. It's you can train anybody on systems and EOS, but when you really have a coach who cares and understands the business, that's really to me what makes the biggest difference. And we've invested a lot of money and a lot of resources in bringing in the absolute best of the best when it comes to coaching.
Mhm.
And so that is one of the reasons why our franchisees at the local level are doing so well, is because we have such an incredible team with support, coaching, technology that is allowing them. And this is something that we realized after about 2 years of franchising is we want to empower our franchisees to work in the business, or excuse me, work on the business, not in the business. So one of the challenges that we had in the beginning was we had limited resources. So a lot of our franchisees were stuck working in the business.
Yeah.
So they couldn't scale. And then we ended up changing a lot of things so that they could actually work on their business and scale their business, hire teams, and not be so involved in the day-to-day operations. And that's where we are today. And that's still a journey, but we've come a very, very long way in doing that.
Yeah. I mean, technology, business resources, coaching. I mean, this reminds me of something you said earlier about investing, like stewarding the flock, right? I think of Mark Siebert over at iFranchise. He says his first rule of franchising is make your franchises wildly successful, and then everything else works itself out. I'm like, well,
Yep.
perfect paraphrase of what we talked about earlier. Where have you felt uh, that? I mean, franchising is not an easy pathway. So you have certainly had a lot of the same hard knocks a lot of the other brands have had as they've tried to get up off the ground, especially starting from, you didn't go into this hyper capitalized. You didn't go
Right.
into this with a franchise mindset because you've been trained how franchising ran. Can you maybe share a little bit about the tough part about this? Because right now it does sound like a lot of rainbows and unicorns, right? And
Yeah.
but there's the other side of getting started where I think faith for me has been most critical when things are not awesome, right? It's
Right.
important all the way across the board, but sometimes clinging to that desperately when things don't seem great has been some of the biggest growth portions of my life, I would say. But can you share maybe a little bit about your journey? Like, where were the tough parts, and how did your faith help you get through the tough parts?
Yeah, there was a lot of tough parts. There still are. If anybody was about to get into franchising, I'd let them know, get ready to experience a lot of pain. That would be my advice to them. Just be ready to embrace that because it's not a rosy path. Even with capital, it's not. In our case, we self-funded and we used debt to fund the franchise. And that was very challenging to do that, very painful to acquire debt, not knowing how things would turn out. And I'd say the biggest pain points that I've experienced in franchising, number one is bringing in the wrong people that don't have our core values. We thankfully we haven't done that too many times, but we've done it twice. And these are franchisees that after a few months I was ready to fire them.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, in franchising, you can't fire them. So instead, you do your absolute best to make their life miserable until they want to quit. Right? No, I'm kidding about that. But there is some truth, right? When you have somebody that's just not a right fit, you have to have some tough conversations because the reality is unless they're damaging the brand, they can stay in the brand as long as they want for their agreement. So for us, we made it very clear with these franchisees that there are some major misalignment issues, and we just encouraged them to exit the system. And we made it really easy for them to exit. And so that's what we did with those two. Very painful. They were good exits, but it's still painful because they put in a lot of their money, right, to buy a franchise. And then they ended up leaving the system. And a lot of it was because we did not do a good job vetting the core values, and we just went too fast through the franchise process. And those were painful times. The other painful times was, again, this was more around capital, but when you don't have a lot of capital, in my case, I'm doing everything. So I'm the CEO and founder, I'm doing frandev, I'm doing coaching, and I'm doing everything else because we don't have the capital to hire. So that's very taxing. It's a huge burden. And especially when I'm doing things that I'm not designed to do. Okay, so I'm not an ops guy. I'm not a legal guy. That's just not me. But yet most of my time was stuck doing that. So that was one of the most painful times. It was depressing. I felt depressed because I was not operating in my gifting, and I felt like I wasn't living out my purpose because I was doing so many things that I didn't like, things that stressed me out. So I was stressed out all the time. And that was very, very painful. I would say the biggest change that happened there was when I brought on Jerry, he's our business coach, but he's also my number two.
Yeah.
He's our COO as well. He's now actually officially our president. But now anything I don't like, I just give it to Jerry. It's awesome. So it's been really nice. I've had that luxury now for probably about 3 months. We brought him on about 3 months ago in a full-time role.
Mhm.
And when I say that, I'm serious. Like if I don't like something, I just give it to Jerry. And the great thing is Jerry's great at what I don't like, and he's crazy enough to like the things I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it just blows my mind. Somebody who likes reading contracts, like I don't know what's wrong with them. That's Jerry. I don't like. I'll get a contract sent to me, and I'm like, Jerry, I don't want to read this. Read it for me, and he'll read the whole thing, every single page. And I'm like, okay, tell me what I need to know in 2 minutes, and I'll sign it.
Mhm.
And he enjoys that kind of stuff. Me, I'm like, oh, just pain to do that kind of stuff. So those are some of my bigger pain points.
Yeah. Well, and tell me a little bit about, so I think that those are common pain points, right? Franchise awards. I talk to founders all the time they're doing frandev and they're doing other things. And sometimes they're really designed to operate, and they love operating. They love coaching. Like, and that's their sweet spot. And they hate selling, and yet they've got to try to sell or award units, right? But it's a sales process, and it makes them uncomfortable, and they're miserable because they're doing things they don't want to do. And it's hard to let it go, though. It's hard because you're like, I can't afford this. How can I make this work financially? How did you lean on your faith as you're going through those tough moments of like feeling down and feeling like I'm doing things that I don't want to do, that I'm miserable doing these things? How did you lean into your faith? And I mean, you obviously made a decision to bring somebody on when
Yeah.
maybe capital was tight. That's a tough decision. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that journey and how you came to that conclusion?
Yeah, it was challenging. I've struggled with depression for many, many, many years, well before franchising. So anytime something like this happens, it just makes my depression worse,
Mhm.
much worse. So in terms of how did I lean on my faith, I would say that the number one thing, I'm so fortunate. I've been married for 10 years and I have an incredible wife. And I have leaned on her a lot. There have been many times when I was not strong enough to keep the faith in the sense of, I'm going to go read my Bible and pray through this. No, I'm not interested in doing that. And
Mhm.
my wife would just come over me and she'd just pray over me. She'd encourage me and she'd get me back on the right track, because sometimes I just wasn't strong enough to go there in my faith. I was just so weak that I wasn't going to give up on life necessarily, but I was just so weak. The thought of praying or getting in the Bible was just like, I can't do it right now. I just can't. And that's where my wife, and I also have several people in my life outside of my wife who were brothers in the faith. And I would go to them and say, listen, I am really struggling right now. My faith is weak. Mentally, I'm weak. Physically, I'm weak. Spiritually, I'm weak. Like, I need you to just pray over me. And I really feel like God did for me what I could not do for myself. I would love to say that I am just so strong that I just pulled my bootstraps up, and man, Daniel Stein just conquered this. No, it doesn't typically happen that way for me. That is why I need Jesus Christ so much in my life, is because I am not strong enough to overcome these painful moments in franchising. I need Jesus every single day of my life. That is why I start my day with being filled with the Holy Spirit in this office. That's how I start my day. I start my day in the Word of God, praying, and I get filled up. Because if I don't do that, I will not be strong enough to overcome those challenges. And that's one of the things that's different about Christianity and all the religions. All the other religions, you have to work towards your religion. Christianity is different in the sense that Jesus Christ has already done it. And we recognize that we aren't strong enough in and of ourselves, and we need a savior. That's what makes Christianity so different. And that's been my experience, is that, listen, I'm not strong enough to become this 100 unit franchisor, but I happen to know somebody who is, and he lives inside me. His name is Jesus Christ. He's strong enough and he'll make it happen.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. I found I want to highlight two things you shared there, because the one, you got help, right? Nobody can do this on their own. No franchisor founder has ever, at least not that I'm aware of, has ever done it on his or her own without getting a tremendous amount of help. And any good founder or CEO will acknowledge that. And just like with me, like I've not been able to do this on my own. I've had to have a team and people I could lean on and people I could ask for help. And my wife has been the same. She's been a point of encouragement, but she's also the one, like she'll also hold me accountable. Like every now and then, when in the early days, she'd be like, "So how are sales coming along? You know, how's revenue?" And I'm like, "Who are you? Like, why are you
That's awesome.
holding me accountable for that?" Like, but we need that, right? We have to have a partner we can trust in life. Hopefully, you've got a great spouse. Like Daniel and I, we married up for sure. We were the reachers and they settled, but I'm glad they settled with us. But you also have to go to sometimes external help. And like you went to Jerry. What a good choice. One, great alignment with the core values and faith, right? Nothing wrong with that. I'll have to snag him sometime to talk about this too. But also reaching out to people in your network who can support you. Like it's just mission critical. And I mean, even Christ had an angel support him, right? On the Mount of Olives. Like Moses had his Aaron. David had like a whole legion of special people that supported him when he was rising in his life. Like if we don't think that we need help, then we're doing it wrong. And that wasn't the purpose of this life, to come down
Yeah,
here and do it.
I agree. I love, Jimmy Evans is a pastor that I really like. I've heard him say once, God's favorite words to hear are, I need help. If you think about the whole Christianity, it's really about surrender. And until you say, I need help, you really can't surrender, because surrender means I can't do this. God, I need you to come into my life and take over. Like that is the essence of Christianity. And that's unfortunately, a lot of people never get there. They just profess Jesus as Lord and Savior, but they don't actually surrender their lives over to his will. And that's really, surrender is saying, I need help. Okay. If I'm Mr. Big and Bad, I don't need your help, God. I'll grow this franchise to 100 units, 300 units. God, I'll occasionally call you on the phone if I need some help. Okay. But you know what? I'm going to run this myself. And that's a big thing that we're big on. And it's speaking to any Christian business owner, in my opinion, I think the number one most important thing any Christian business owner has to do from the very beginning is acknowledge this business does not belong to you.
Mhm.
If you actually live that way in your business, it changes everything. Everything. I could go on and on about stories where it made every logical sense to do X, and God said, no, I want you to do Y. God, Y makes no sense, and Y is really stupid. Did you know that?
Mhm.
Son, I told you to do Y. It's in your best interest, right? Do Y. Most of the things God tells us to do, faith, it doesn't make sense. It's actually, the kingdom of God is actually very backwards.
Mhm.
It's very backwards in so many ways, and especially what I just said. You started a business and now you want to say it's God's business. That's backwards.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? I started this. I put my money. Is it really your money? Where'd that money come from? That's where it all starts. Most people don't get there, but that's where it starts, and that's where the secret sauce is.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think when you say it's backwards with respect to the way the world thinks about it. Like my money, my business, my growth, what's in it for me.
Yep.
But there's never been any happiness or success. Well, maybe monetary or financial success. It really comes out of selfishness.
Yep.
And these things that we are building, they can become major vehicles for good. I really respect a lot of the brands out there that have done major good.
Yes.
They've created their business. That the term profit with a purpose was really popular about 7 years ago. It's kind of faded. It seems like it's taken a back seat, but business can be a vehicle to do the Lord's work. It can be a vehicle that can inspire people and lift them up and save them from depression, save them from physical maladies that might shorten their lives. And I'm grateful that you shared your journey with us and you're comfortable sharing your faith with us, Daniel, because that's got to be an important part of the business community. And there doesn't need to be a major separation, which I think is kind of what society's trying to pound into our heads right now. But I'd like to buck that trend. So thanks for taking the first step with me to do that, Daniel.
Absolutely appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, guys, a couple of summary points. Don't do it alone. Lean on a higher power. If you believe in Jesus Christ, trust Him, trust God, that they can help you out, because they can, and they will if you lean on them and ask for it. And sure, I'm grateful for you, Daniel, a friendship, and also you're an inspiration to me and a lot of other people. So thanks for being a good conduit for heaven's light on this planet.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a blessing.
Thanks a lot, Daniel.
Thanks, Dave.